You're listening to the Neil Lamptey Show. My name's Joey, and this week I'm joined by Laurie.
All right, mate.
And by Dom.
Hello.
Rotating the squad just to banish any kind of early season fatigue on the part of Paul and Neil. Thank you for joining us, Geordie Huula and Amadou Bakayoko. Let's go
Who's who?
Oh, yeah, I think it's... that's much of a muchness, I should think. Let's do moments of the week. Dom, do you want to start us off?
Well, it's not maybe a moment, more an emotion of the week, if that counts. Basically, I wasn't really following the game that closely. On Saturday, I was having a meal, and I don't know, there's just something about when you're not sort of properly following the game that just gives you that distance you need to sort of take a defeat. I don't know whether also that is partially because we won promotion last season for the first time since sliced bread, and it's like, what happens next? We just football doesn't end. That we just keep playing football, and it's just basically the same every season. You win some games, you lose some games. So that was been my feelings about this Bristol Rovers games.
Well, and that's the strange thing with us that I think is not unique, but probably more pronounced than it is with other clubs, is we don't really do mid-table finishes, do we? And yet,
it's been a while.
And yet I think this season is gearing up, possibly, albeit that it's still in sort of reasonably early stages, that we will win some games, we will lose some games, and we will draw some games. And I'm not sure that COF fans are going to be able to cope with the greyness of it. Like, it'll be like this sort of ever sort of perpetuating crisis, because people will be like, oh, we've lost 2 games, and then we'll win 2 games, and people will think, well, that's brilliant, we're going to get promoted now. Whereas actually none of it's true.
But if we do finish mid-table, there's no chance we're going to do it with lots of 1-0 wins, 1-0 defeats and 1-0 draws. There'll be spectacular 3-0 capitulations and then like spectacular 3-0 wins, and there'll just be a horrible oscillation between ecstasy and agony. So it'll still feel like an absolutely bonkers season, even if we finish 11 and a half in the league.
The startling 3-0 capitulations I can absolutely see. I'll get back to you when we have the scintillating 3-0 3 Tonkins. Laurie, your moment of the week.
Yeah, I had a few questions to ask Sammy about his moment, but I'll do my moment first. And again, more of a low moment, which was actually Dom Hyam's goal, because me and my mate, who was a COF fan, and my other mate, who definitely isn't a COF fan, we were rubbing our hands together, waiting to walk right out of that stadium. And then he pops up at the back post, slams it into the corner, and you're like, are you serious, Dom? Are you serious? Could you not have waited until the 65th minute to do that? And we could have been in a pub forgetting about this already. But instead, we had to go down to the shambolic Rovers halftime catering, where they ran out of pints after about
top class.
6 minutes. Like, you're already getting rained on in an open terrace, and they run out of alcohol. Do they not like money, these League One teams? Like, who's running these absolute circuses? Anyway, yeah, it was really disappointing that he scored at that point, because then we had to stay until the 85th minute.
Have either of you two deliberately left a game significantly early before? And I'm thinking sort of like maybe before the 70th minute, I guess.
No.
I did quite recently. The Lincoln home game. We lost, was it 4-2?
Oh yeah.
4-2.
And it was like I'd made a spontaneous decision to go to the game, because I've got to get the train there. So it's kind of hard to get to midweek games for me usually. And I was looking at the train times when Lincoln had scored, I think, like the 4th goal, and they were really starting to time waste and just getting all niggly. I was just like, I've seen this game like 100 times before. I know what's going to happen. And the only difference is I could be home at a reasonable time or like just before midnight or 11:30 or something. It's a really annoying time to get back from a defeat.
I don't think I have, strangely enough.
There are just those moments when you look on BBC Sport and you're looking at the scores. And there was a game this weekend actually where a team were losing 2-0 in the 79th minute, and they scored twice in 75 seconds. And those things just haunt me. And I think I never want to be the person who's abandoned their team and just to get you, they'll give you like the best moment of all time. And you just out because your life's so jam-packed that you had to be on your way.
Yeah, let's not forget there's, of course, the Dan guy, isn't there, who left that Crew game at 0-0 and didn't realise that we got those two late goals in that second leg against Crew. The only one that I can think of is, do you remember we played Torquay away in the probably the League Cup or the FA Cup years ago? I say years ago, it's probably about 5 years ago or something like that. I left that on maybe 88 minutes, I think.
We home or away? Presumably home.
No, it was away.
You went to Torquay?
Yeah. Paul went on a sleeper train, if you can imagine that. So it must have been a few more years ago than 5, because I don't think they've existed for... Presumably
you were there chucking the coal into the engine.
Well, I think it was driven by a ghost. So yeah, but my dad was very ill, and we'd gone together, and then he'd had to stay in a hotel room, and then I got a call saying, look, we really need to go. So I just went back, and then Elliot, in a game that I don't think had any shots, Elliot Ward scored very, very, very late on, and I was like, oh, that was good. But yeah, Torquay's quite nice.
I once went there with my mate who supports Bristol City, and it was so foggy that we were 3-0 up at half time, but we didn't see a single goal. All you'd see was Leroy Lita coming out of the smoke with his arms in the air. And you'd be like, it's another one, it's another one. It definitely should have been called off. It was ridiculous.
Nice. I was, my moment of the week, I was following the game. In fact, Laurie, do you want to ask your questions of Dom for his moment of the week first?
Yeah, that feeling that you're talking about, I find it very unsettling when I either kind of forget a game's going on or I haven't checked any of the scores, and then I think for a moment, is this what my life could be like? Is it better? And then I think, how many times would I have to do this to stop caring? And I've never checked that, but have either of you checked that?
There's only one game, apart from the Arsenal game recently, I knew was on, but I didn't care, and I sort of flicked into it occasionally. But there's only one game ever that I can remember not being aware of, and then finding out the next day that it had taken place. And it was a game against Portsmouth away, and it was midweek. It was on a Tuesday night, and it had just passed me by that it was happening, and we won 3-0. And I did think maybe if I just stopped looking, we would just keep banging a load of goals in. But I never actually checked that theory. Dom, have you ever tried to go and hide away for a moment?
I'm trying to think of something like this, but I think sort of the process I've had sort of over the past 5 or 6 years is going from really, really caring and letting like a defeat ruin a weekend, and just going, well, you know, football is mostly disappointing. There's sort of a handful of moments that make it really worth going, but an individual win or loss isn't everything. You sort of just learning. I've been sort of trying to. I don't know how to describe it, but just trying to learn not to care that much, because just football is eternal.
Yeah, like you say, it can consume you if you're not careful, can't it?
I've half taken that stance. I've now got to the point where I can let a win absolutely make my weekend and make me kind of be farting rainbows for a few days. But if we lose, I just try and pretend that it hasn't happened. I almost forget I support Cov for a bit, and it makes everything much easier.
it's really easy for me because if I've been to the game, usually it's with Paul, and we usually have a drive back of circa 2 hours. And after shouting at each other for 2 hours, we're usually pretty well over it by the time that I'm on the tram back to my house. I don't know whether if I lived in like Canley or something, I don't know whether I'd be like furious for the rest of the weekend or whatever. But usually I can't. My voice is gone by the time that I'm out of the car, so we're usually pretty good. My moment of the week, I was following the game on iFollow, which meant that I was abroad, obviously. And I couldn't get a good connection where I was, in part because I was so close to Old Trafford, and where I would normally boost my laptop off, spiritually speaking, obviously I was actually in Munich. Because Man United were playing a rare 3:00 home game, there was no 4G because it was just all eaten up by tourists and whatever else. So I couldn't use the 4G to boost my laptop off, and the Wi-Fi was crap. So I was sort of dipping in and out, especially of the first half hour. I missed the first 10 minutes wholesale, but it just felt like every time I managed to get a connection again, another goal had gone in. And I was like, is this real or is this just a broken feed? Then what made it even more confusing was when I finally got to half-time and got to some semblance of normality with it, is I found out that you can click the scroller backwards to watch the first half again. And so I watched the first 10 minutes that I'd missed completely, and I was like, this is a completely different game. This isn't how we didn't. There's no way that a team that started like this ended up losing, like being 3-1 down at half time. I just couldn't. It only could seem like a sort of technical malfunction rather than an actual football game. But alas, I've done the research. It turns out it did really happen. Laurie, you were there. That. You were there, yeah. Do you want to sort of expand on that verification?
Yeah. So the team was quite reserved looking. We had Kelly and Doyle in the middle. Dijon back at right back. Shipley was in.
Can I have his full name, please?
Dijon Sterling.
That's correct. Thank you. Yeah.
And this was my first chance to see Chaplin, which I was excited about. Bayliss wasn't there. Thomas was playing again, and last time I saw him was at Gillingham, I think, and I was impressed then. And yeah, as you say, we started well, but we were just playing neat and tidy football. But Rovers were just kind of all over the place. We were just kind of slicing through them without really trying too hard. That said, our best chances came from these two corners consecutively. JCH headed one, keeper made a good save. Not sure why Shipley's now relegated from almost every aspect of the team. He doesn't take corners anymore. Doyle now takes them.
Yeah, what? There's a double thing going on here. One, Jordan Shipley's corners are quite good. Two, Doyle's corners are Doyle's corners. It's not just that one is a bad decision, it's a double whammy of bad decision there. I can't quite place it.
But, I mean, I would agree with you, apart if I wasn't talking about two Doyle corners that led to extremely good chances.
Good point. So. Yeah, carry on.
So, keeper made a great save off JCH, and then there was a second corner that kind of got bounced around a bit, and it fell to, I think it was Johnson again, and it just, when you were watching it from the away end, I could not believe it hadn't gone in. I initially thought he just smashed it into someone's face because it was such a hard shot and it had been saved, but the two guys I was with were like, no, the keeper saved that. And I watched the highlights today, and it is a really good save, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it. So should have scored anyway. And then just after that, Luke Thomas gets in down the right and pulls one across goal that's like agonisingly touched out off the heel of a defender. So by this point, we're thinking 3-0 wouldn't have been an unfair score line, although obviously if you score the first goal it changes, you understand. Anyway, so lots of early pressure, and that all goes to shit in a very quick spell, and there is one player who is involved in every single goal, and I think you know who it is. So keeper does a very Burge-like kick flat down the middle. Hyam kind of misses or loses out on his header, and then Sterling Sterling, he gets kind of a bit how like Junior Brown lost his footing last week and let in their striker. Sterling kind of crouches down and then just like collapses a bit.
It's odd, isn't
and
it?
then it's really bizarre. And he's looking more and more like kind of Bambi every time I see him, with these long, like elegant legs that just seem to let him down all the time. And their player, the ball's moving so fast that Burge doesn't really have time to narrow the angle. And it's like one of the simplest. He just kicks it in a straight line exactly where he wants it to go. And I know that's how most finishes happen. But it just seems like there was never any doubt that it was going in. There was just a giant gap for him to score into. So they couldn't believe it. They were almost like boos and whistles coming after our third chance, because it was so incessant and we were obviously about to thrash them.
Are you letting Jordan Willis off a little bit easy there?
Well, I was confused initially because I wrote in my notes, Willis cocks up, but then it seemed a lot like Sterling.
So
the first header?
No, it's two different cock-ups. You're absolutely right about Sterling. It goes over Hyam's head. It's probably just out of reach for him to get to. And then Sterling's the first player that it comes across. And like you say, he crumples like a papier-mâché hat. It doesn't even really make any sense. It looks like he's like ill or something when he falls over.
Yeah.
But actually, the ball runs through, and it feels like Willis has got at least some opportunity to put up more opposition than he does with the striker. But he kind of just does the same. Like, he kind of just falls over a little bit as he goes through, and it just smacked to me of just the pair of them not concentrating.
Yeah, and his thing is being quick as well. That's what gets him out of shit almost every week. And yeah, he didn't cover himself in glory. But anyway, I think conceding one bad goal isn't a disaster. Like that, I wasn't too downhearted after that, conceding that goal. But then their second goal was maybe even easier. And Willis screams at Sterling for that one as well, because this guy is just completely unmarked. And because of the angle of the highlights, and when you're watching it from ground level, it's very hard to tell who's marking who. But Willis screams in Sterling's face as if he's completely just lost his guy, although Sterling tries to stand up for himself. I don't know if that means anything. So they nod that one in 2-0. And then Bristol Rovers then starts curling screamers in from the edge of the box, although Burge gets quite a decent hand on it. And how highly I rate Burge, I kind of think once he's got a hand on it, I back him to save it normally. So it's kind of disappointing that it ends up in the back of the net. And 3-0, like, it was ridiculous. Like, we had so much pressure and it was just like bubble burst spectacularly. And then what do you do? Is this going to be like a Yeovil situation? I was like, I don't want this to be like 6. So let's just consolidate. And we did. And Rovers kind of just kept it tight after that. We get this one from a free kick. Hyam nodding it in. And then we get into half-time, can't go home. And Rovers then just sit tight. And Robbins must have had big words with Sterling at half-time for him to come off for a youth team player
who's not a right back either, I don't think, is he?
And he's not a right back either. I saw him play right back, or the right side of a central 3, which isn't really the same in that pre-season friendly. But I mean, he barely touched the ball in the second half because Rovers didn't really want to venture past the halfway line. So he probably came out of it looking quite good. But I mean, that's really another bus throw from Robbins, isn't it? Like, you take off Sterling when he's been involved in all of the goals. He needed to come off. He looked scared, and there was growing noises being made whenever he was anywhere near the ball. Because a lot of the time, that was it for the third goal, the one that ends up getting hammered in from the edge of the box. He's just not very good at blocking crosses. He really doesn't think it's an issue to let the ball come in from the corner area. He just thinks, I'm kind of in the right place. I've put my foot up and that's enough. He doesn't really seem to be that worried about balls coming in. And it happened a number of times, and that was the only one that resulted in a goal. But yeah, he just looks a bit soft, and he's not. Yeah, I don't know. I know he's a good player, and I know he's technically good, but this is big school now, and he doesn't look like he likes it in big school.
Well, that's an interesting one of this thing. This idea of we know he's a good player. Is that true?
Well, that's based on tiny moments where you see him collecting the ball, taking a nice touch, and ambling forward in a kind of impressive playground kind of way. But in terms of like his structural positional play and like just doing the basic stuff, that is where he's falling down, like the kind of boring stuff. So I don't know. I think technically he is a good player, but by technical I mean he's got a good touch and good control, but maybe you need a bit more Chris Stokes in him for him to be functional at this level.
It's just, it's difficult. He's only played, what, 3 games? 4 games? It's probably a little bit more than that, but even still, it's not many, is it? But
No.
I don't know. There's bits of him that have looked good, and there's bits of him that look like a very, very raw young boy that's still developing. And I almost think it's unfair to pass opinion either way on his ability. The question is he the right back we need in League 2 in League 1 right now? And we don't know that yet. We probably won't know it until pretty much near the end of the season. But moments like that first half on Saturday, it's not exactly a glowing appraisal of what we need, is it? Dom, what have you made of him so far?
I haven't really seen enough of him to form a definitive opinion of him. Sort of, you hear about this Chelsea kid who's playing for the England youth teams, who's creating and scoring goals, saw the YouTube videos, and for first couple of times I saw him, I thought, okay, he seems decent enough going forward, a bit ropey defensively. I suppose that's what you'd expect from someone who was billed as sort of a right winger turned fullback. But I think since then, since he came in for a bit of criticism, certainly after the first game against Scunthorpe, where he was arguably at fault for both the goals that Scunthorpe scored, he seemed to sort of retreat in himself a little bit, where we haven't seen too many of those moments going forward since then, of what he can actually do to in a positive sense, where, and I just think at the moment when he is sort of looking defensively a bit rickety, that you want to see why he's worth persevering with, if he can sort of account for that with attacking play, whether he can create and score chances, whether there's that risk and reward thing with playing him. At the moment, it just looks like you're not really getting either side of the game from him. But I haven't seen enough to trust whether he's going to get better or whether you need to take him out the side, although he is pretty much our only right back at the moment.
Well, and this is the question, is if you've got 2 fully fit right backs at the moment, is it Grimmer or Sterling that plays in the next game for you?
I would go for Grimmer. I think you don't really want to get on a bad run after the result we had, and Grimmer's more experienced, and he shows a couple of times he's played this season that can offer both sides of the game a little bit better than Sterling is at the moment.
Somebody made a good point talking about the Premier League recently when they were talking about Everton and their defence. Is their defence has been really unsettled, and I think it was Michael Keane got injured and a few other players, and that somebody had said they were surprised that in such an unsettled back four they'd gone for that new signing, that Lucas Dean above Baines, because at least Baines would have offered some consistency and experience that would have pulled the back four together ever so slightly more than a new signing might have done. And there is an element of that for me with Grimmer, that if you've got the left backs switching pretty constantly, I would like to see a bit more. I think changing both full backs at the same time is quite a risky strategy. You don't know how much they're both going to push on. You don't know how they're going to affect the dynamic of the back four. Introducing them one and then one just makes me feel a little bit more comfortable. But then I basically want us to play one first 11 all season and never change it. So maybe I'm not being realistic. Laurie, pick it up from there. What else is there worth commenting on?
I think I'll probably talk a little bit more generally, because I think the second half was like kind of a non-event, because Rovers just came out and what were they, 22nd before the game? They're like, we're 3-1 up at half time. This Cov team don't look up to much, because Kelly and Doyle were creating absolutely nothing in central midfield. It was the worst kind of Doyle and Kelly performance. Neither of them individually had like a terrible game, but neither of them were giving us what we needed. We missed Bayliss so much, to the point where Connor Chaplin, who alongside Hyam and Thomas, I thought all actually had really good games. Chaplin, his touch is just next level. He looks a very good player at this level. He's always looking for the ball. Everyone trusts him, and he just looks comfortable all the time. But what was happening was because there was no Bayliss, he was dropping so deep.
Yeah.
Because he could see there was no creativity in the centre. So he was like, I need to sort this out because it's just getting so boring to watch. And he'd go back there, and then he'd be trying to play balls into places where he should be and where JCH was having to fill in. And the last thing you really want is JCH receiving the ball with his face to goal, to be honest, because he's awful at it. The only place I want JCH is winning balls in the air and immediately giving it to someone else. Because the amount of times he just gets the ball at his feet, doesn't know what to do. Like, I kind of wonder how he got through some of these academies, because his technical ability is so poor sometimes.
He also scored a phenomenal number of goals, didn't he, from memory? I think there was a season where it was him and Billy Daniels up front that were scoring for fun.
Really?
Yeah, I think he really, really did plunder for a period.
Was Dujon Sterling in that team as well?
Wow, quite possibly.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Dom?
I was going to say, I think it tends to be the case sometimes with youth team players that the ones who stand out at that level pretty quickly are the ones who are bigger and stronger than the other kids who just have a physical advantage, and sometimes they can dominate without really improving their games, and when they have to take a step up to first team football, they don't have the physical advantage and haven't really been developing the technical side of their game. So I think Bakayoko had a similar thing with Walsall, where he was banging them in for their youth team sides, and never convincingly did the same at first team level.
Still plenty of time.
In a completely unrelated note, how are Dan Agyei and Andre Wright getting on?
I hope very badly.
Weirdly, I felt like the sort of the argument for Bayliss's inclusion in central midfield above all else was strengthened more on Saturday through any positive performance he could have actually put in on the pitch himself. For me, the problem mainly on Saturday with those two, it wasn't even the lack of creativity. I just thought they were ponderous on the ball. I just thought that too often they were caught napping in midfield, and that they were just pressed too heavily and weren't quick enough about moving it. And there's part of me that sympathises with the pair of them, because I don't think... We talked last week about, and in the last couple of weeks, about where it was working was... Shipley on the left makes sense when you've got Bayliss in the middle, because if Bayliss breaks, you've got Shipley to tuck in and look after the rest of the midfield. But if you've got Doyle and Kelly in the centre, it's not especially sensible to have another sort of deep-sitting left-sided midfielder next to him, because it that stunted the creativity much more. I think we could have got away with it if we'd have had if we'd have got another Thomas on the left-hand side as well. I don't think it would have been quite as problematic. But like I say, on top of that, it was infuriating at times just seeing them getting dispossessed because they were kind of looking up, not seeing anybody, but also not moving it on quick enough.
And I think they invite that pressing because you've got someone like Thomas who immediately puts people on the back foot because they know he wants to run at them. So either they're really brave and they get super tight, or as what normally happens, they give him a little bit of space. And he was able to kind of open them up at times. But yeah, I think Doyle and Kelly were just inviting the pressure. And Shipley's not going to run at anyone, is he? Like you say, he's kind of a deep sitting, almost a central left-sided midfielder. But what's the deal with Alassani? Is he just not? Is he not ready? Does Robin say anything about him? Because it does seem like, I completely agree with you. If you're playing three pretty defensive midfielders in the same midfield and relying on Thomas would end up starting on the right-hand side and running all the way across the pitch because he had so few runners to find that he would just kind of run out of options and then end up on the left-hand side of the pitch and be like, all right, I better give it to someone else then and go back to where I should have been.
I just think with the thing with Alassani is that it's, and I'm not saying that this is the like optimum solution, but it is a solution, is if you're desperate to play Doyle and Kelly in the middle and Bayliss isn't available, you can play those two. You can put Tony Andrew ahead of them. You can put Clark Harris up front on his own and put Thomas and Alassani either side of him. And the aim isn't to get the ball to Johnson Clark Harris to score. The aim is to get the ball to Thomas and Alassani to score, and that Johnson Clark Harris is a sort of pseudo battering ram,
and he never looks at the goal.
Yeah, you know, he's there to cause trouble. He's there to sort of soften up defenders and draw them out and whatever else. And then Thomas, who, you know, empirically isn't afraid of a shot, and Alassani, who likewise seems to be a goal scorer from out wide first and foremost, are well served by a player that's looking for players to make inside runs. That's the sort of thing that I think, I see. When he bought Alassani, I thought, oh, right, so you either want him as a replacement for Jones in a system like that, or to complement Jones on the other side, and you want to play Tony Andrew. But this season, it seems to just be the same as last season, where it's kind of, these are the players that I haven't fallen out with this week. Let's see how they do if I put them all on the pitch at the same time together.
Yeah. And if, like you say, because of the injury to Bayliss, if ever there was a game where Andrew should have started, then this was it. But that would have needed like another system change, and maybe he doesn't want to do that. But
even though it wouldn't have really worked, there was an argument to say that if he really was desperate, and I think he loves to play Doyle and Kelly, doesn't he? You could have put, if he wanted to persevere with 4-4-2 to make sure that Chaplin was accommodated, you could put Andrew on the left, and it's really, really, like, what's the word? Like, it's a real bodge job, but at least there is a creative element to them.
Yeah, and it's just as much of a bodge job as putting Shipley out there. Like, Shipley's not a left winger really, or left midfielder. So, and we just had no one who wanted to pick a pass, and he didn't make the subs until quite late on, until really the game was gone. Like, Rovers were kind of settled. They would already started to hit us on the break, because even though we weren't really cutting them open, we were committing a lot of players forward, and they then started finding these gaps kind of by accident, because they really didn't want to attack us. It just kept happening. But yeah, I think Tony needed to come on a little bit earlier. Like, the game was gone by the time he came on, and he did play a few nice passes. I think he played in a really nice one for Luke Thomas that either went wide or got saved. And then Bakayoko came on at the end. But yeah, throughout I thought Chaplin. I was trying to get positives out of this, because after when the third goal came in, my mate just turned to me, he was like, how long's gone? And I was like, 23 minutes. And he was like, oh right. Like, can you imagine a worse game to take your friend to than a Bristol Rovers away, outside, no roof, pouring with rain, and you're losing 3-0 within 20? The only positive is that we're a 10-minute Uber drive from his house.
I was going to say, you are a son of Bristol, aren't you?
Yeah, that is my hood. Not that it's a hood or I live in hoods.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was basically the size of the game. I was trying to look positive. Hyam was good. Chaplin, Thomas. But after that, I kind of run out of enthusiasm for our team.
Well,
Junior Brown, I didn't make a single note about him, so I can't even remember if he was good or bad. I think I was much closer to Sterling, and Sterling was doing such a good job of bringing negative attention on himself that it was hard to ignore him.
Junior Brown's been unusual so far, hasn't he? He's another player that I can equally see by the end of the season we go, oh, he really came through and came good, or could be a real head scratcher as to why he was so highly rated at Scunthorpe. He just seems
Shrewsbury pyramid scheme, you mean, that we've become a part of?
Oh, sorry, Shrewsbury. What did I say? Scunthorpe. He just seems very clumsy. Like a very but I thought in the second half, I thought he at least offered quite a reasonable outlet at times. But yeah, again, time will tell. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe we've got a long way to go before we really judge this season. And what we've seen so far has just been absolute inconsistency, hasn't it? I guess we'll have to wait and see how that ends up. I wanted to ask about Thomas, so I wanted to ask Dom about what you've made of Thomas so
far. When that first appearance for him, I was really excited about him. It wasn't just that he was making things happen, but it was stuff like him sort of pointing for the ball, wanting the ball. It was sort of someone who wanted to make things happen, and then he sort of, at the moment, he's on that sort of Ryan Kent, Jacob Murphy area where he, I think he's still making similar impact on games, but it's just because we've seen 4 or 5 appearances now where, for all that trickery, for all that intent, for all that pace, there hasn't been a goal or an assist. It's sort of actually quite reminiscent of Jody Jones in his sort of first full season for us, where he started to become less and less excited when he cut inside onto his left foot and put in a really weak shot for the goalkeeper. So,
but do you know what's bound to happen now? He's going to tuck away one of them, just like Ryan Kent did, and then
off to Rangers.
To continue.
I think he's been. I've been quite impressed by the fact that his work rate seems to have gone up as he's gone through, but I'm still concerned that I really like a player that shoots a lot because I believe in playing the percentages, and I think Jordan Shipley, admittedly this is probably confirmation bias, but I thought Jordan Shipley showed why it's worthwhile against who did we play where he's no, not was it Oxford, yeah. Sometimes you don't know what's going to come of it, so it's worth a go, isn't it? The only thing with Thomas is that he stretches that out as far as it can possibly go, because at least once a game so far there's been a shot that he's taken where you've gone, that really would have been quite a chance if you'd have just squared it just like a little bit. And it's some of the angles that he goes from where you just think, you are literally only here to try and get more games at Derby, aren't you? Like, there's no consideration in your mind about what might be happening for the team. But I do think he looks like a tremendously exciting player, doesn't he? That's probably horribly unfair. I'm only being a bit silly of saying that. But there's times where you just think, have you met your teammates? Is it something you might want to consider? Any other final thoughts?
Can I ask you guys about Chaplin?
Yes.
Just because I'm struggling not to get really, really excited about him, because based on that one game, so I'd like you to level me out if the other game has been different. But I just think he's got the potential to be as good as McNulty, if not better. He seems really committed. He puts the yards in. He's creative and clever, and he's quite strong. Low centre of gravity. I just think there's no way we're not going to sell him for less than like £2 million.
I'm going to let Dom pick up on this.
Yeah, I've really been pleasantly surprised by Chaplin. There was always that thing where you're like, why are Portsmouth letting him go? but based on what we've seen so far, he just looks like someone who's just switched on. He looks to be just sort of more sort of mentally rather than even physically or even technically sort of above all the other options in the teams.
Yeah.
And
just his decision making for how old he is.
Yeah, and it's just like when we signed him and just throughout the whole transfer saga, it was just all that. It was like, do we really need another striker? And thus far, based on the first handful of appearances thus far, it looks like he's shown just why he was worth the wait. I suppose there's always that risk now that maybe if he doesn't score in the next 2 or 3 games, that his confidence starts to go down. And seeing what impact that has in his game, whether he's someone who can play himself back into form, would be interesting. Although I prefer if he scored a couple of hat-tricks in the next couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, that would be good.
Ideal.
I think the thing with him, and this is one of them things that can go either way, isn't it? Where you say, well, why didn't he really get a look in at Portsmouth? But I think they were very keen to play one up front, and firstly, he, I think, isn't a one up front player, is he? And secondly, their one up front was the second top scorer in League One last season, weren't he? So he was, I think, you could say, actually, there is like a really significant justification for him not getting a look in there. Or it could just be that he's not as good as everyone thinks he is. On the early lookout of it, he looks like he's got something quite a lot about him, especially for someone so short. Nobody in the entire summer of all of the Chaplin loving and everything, I didn't realise he was quite so little.
Yeah, he's Diddy.
He's Diddy, but what's it? But he's got that lovely Sergio Aguero thing where he doesn't seem easily knocked off the ball or anything, does he? It doesn't seem that that's an impedance to him. It's just a fact. But I've been impressed so far. He should have scored, obviously, at the start.
Yes, he should.
And he had the goal ruled off for offside, which, from my standpoint in Germany, it did.
Was that right at the end? I think I actually wasn't there for that. Yeah.
It was a. Do you know what? It was a really gorgeous finish. He
nice.
whacked it right into the bottom corner. You can never tell on the telly because you just can't, can you? But my gut feeling looking at it was, I was like, that seemed tight at best. And on the radio, they were saying that would be really interesting to see that again. I don't know if anybody's has Richard Keys got an angle for us on this one, or I'll take that as a no. But I mean, he has certainly looked interesting. I think, another one that I was going to say.
Makes me feel a lot better about spending 200 grand on Bakayoko, because to be honest, I would have spent 700 grand on Chaplin. So let's just chalk Bakayoko up as a kind of impulse buy, and Chaplin cost 700 grand instead. There's
a strange thing with them two, isn't there, Huula and Bakayoko? Because I guess the alternative is to go into a season like Mowbray did without. I guess he had to make sure that we'd got strikers, because you couldn't go into the season without
Succeeded.
one. Yeah, tick. But then it does feel a little bit like Huula, especially, is going to be like, well, what do I do now then? It'd be like, well,
Huula.
Don't worry about it, mate. If 5 or 6 players get injured, you'll be banging there. And he doesn't look bad, does he? I didn't think he looked like a bad player, but there's just so many players vying for position that I don't know. I love
Bakayoko coming on and getting really like a kind of Sol Campbell reception from the Rovers fans. I was like, what are you so angry about? You completely dodged a bullet here. You should be thanking this guy.
Yeah, that should have been moment of the week, actually. He got absolute dog's abuse when he came on, didn't he? You just think he's not even. It was brilliant hearing Clive. Clive was really disdainful of it. He was like, he never even kicked a ball. How could they be going so mad? He was like, yeah, you're right, yeah.
That guy never gets a break, Bakayoko. Hated by Walsall fans. It took him 2-3 games for him to be sort of disavowed by a large section of our fan base, and he gets hated on by Bristol Rovers fans without even playing for them.
Yeah. In Sierra Leone, do you reckon when he goes back there, they're just like, get out of it?
Well, he turned down an international call-up, didn't he? So
Oh, yeah, you're
that's
right.
a whole
Yeah.
country he's...
He's turned it down. Why? Keep
I know,
himself
is he
fresh
like-
to the bench.
Is he like the Larry David of football?
Perhaps he doesn't want to countenance the possibility of running into Craig Bellamy, who I think has got significant
Sierra
Leone. No, I think he's got
Football academy. or
like a
something.
football academy and stuff out there, and then he did the most Bellamy-esque thing that you could imagine. He in a week where it came out that he'd got all of this kind of what sounds reasonably altruistic interest in Sierra Leone. I think then like had a big fight in a casino over there and everything. You're like, you could take the boy out of Cardiff, but yeah. I think that's all I've got to say about Sierra Leone. And have we got anything else to say about the Bristol Rovers game before we move on?
No, thanks to the fans for travelling. We go again next week. We'll put it right. Yada, yada, yada.
Was that a marquee that you were under, by the way?
I was nowhere near the marquee. I actually brought an umbrella that had a picture of Venice on the top of it, so I fitted right in. Thanks, Mum, for that.
Why have you got why have you got an umbrella with a picture of Venice on it?
Because my mum went to Venice, and that was the only umbrella in the house. The other one was actually red and had a duck on the handle, but my friend was too embarrassed to put it up. He preferred to stand there getting soaked, so each to their own.
I would have taken that as quite a fitting Nason tribute. But
yeah, same.
Right, let's do some preview then, shall we? Dom. Sunderland.
Yes, what do you want to know?
Everything.
Basically everything, yeah. They're third. Well,
yeah, it's
in a weird way, I can imagine that they're simultaneously happy and unhappy with that.
Yeah, it's sort of been a weird start to the season for them. They conceded the first goal in every game, except for on Saturday, which was the first time they hadn't conceded first. And generally, they'd been coming back from goals behind. The week before, they lost to Burton after conceding the first goal, and maybe that's sort of seen them turn the corner a bit. They've got a really weird squad at the moment. They've sort of really struggled to shift some of their high earners from the Championship and Premier League days. They had to sack Didier Ndong and Papi Djilabodji over the summer, who basically decided unilaterally that they weren't going to play in League One, even though
Sorry, who did they sack?
Didier Ndong, who's their club record signing, and Papi Djilabodji.
Incredible.
Very
good pronunciation.
Papi Djilabodji, who appears to be a April Fool's trick that Chelsea played on Sunderland by signing him for 4 million, never playing, and being like, yeah, no, I mean, we bought him, so he must be good, and then selling him to Sunderland. I think when they said about him coming back, they gave him a month off to try and find another club.
Yeah.
And then when he came back after, was it over 2 months that he decided to take off afterwards? By the sounds of it, he wasn't just out of shape. Like, he was like Roy Chubby Brown, full on. Completely out of control. Which I always think is brilliant in footballers, when they can manage to get themselves from a position where they were a professional athlete in May, and they come back and they're supposedly like some mess. You just think, wow, what did you do with your summer? So they've managed to shed those, but still some bloated wages and egos in the squad there.
Has Rodwell gone?
Yeah, he was snapped up, of course, by Tony Mowbray at Blackburn.
Is that right? That passed me by.
Yeah. Yeah, I also quite like Blackburn. I've got Rodwell, and they also signed a player over the summer called Rothwell. So
oh man,
I always kind of thought maybe Tony Mowbray sort of like sent a note out or dictated something to like an assistant, and they got their wires crossed.
Yeah, like a Everton, MacArthur and McCarthy situation.
Yeah. So basically, it's a team with like players like Lee Cattermole and Brian Oviedo, who are still on Premier League wages. They've got some really promising academy players coming through. They've got Josh Marger, who is the top scorer in League One at the moment, who's basically been their only striker who's been fit for the whole season. But he's quick, he's strong, and his first goal against Rochdale at the weekend was really good. Just took the ball into his feet really quickly and got his shot away, and he just looked a cut above with that. Just
How old is he?
good question. I'd say 19, 20.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he sort of came through last season in their sort of miserable relegation season from the Championship. I think Chris Coleman picked him because why not? And he scored a couple of goals, but he sort of really kicked on this year. We've got Lyndon Gooch as well, who's been around their first team for ages and has finally stepped up. He's sort of he's a very nimble-footed player, likes to take players on, can cut inside very quickly. He's got a good centre of gravity on him. He's scored and assisted a few goals. And then they've got their signings from the summer, which were good signings, but not really the signings of a club expecting to get into the Championship next season and look to push on back into the Premier League. They're sort of good League One / lower Championship players. Players like Chris Maguire, who can be really good at this level. I mean, he's someone who doesn't have loads and loads of pace, but he just strikes the ball so well. His crossing is just absolutely like on a penny. And of course, just don't give him free kicks anywhere near your goal because there's every chance he'll stick it into the top corner. He's just laser
James
accurate.
Maddison.
Yeah. And they've got a few other players who sort of good League One Championship-ish players. Their goalkeeper, John McLaughlin, was part of that Burton side who were basically impossible to score against a couple of years ago. He's a really good shot stopper. But generally, there's sort of been a bit of a problem with the manager not quite figuring out what his best side is, how to line the players up. But Jack Ross is a manager who won the Championship with St Mirren last year, the Scottish Championship, by the way. But he's really good at sort of just tweaking his tactics and getting it right towards the end. So that's something to watch out for. If things aren't working out for them, they will change things up. It's possibly just a lack of pace and dynamism sort of towards the back of the team. They've got Lee Cattermole, who's still playing, who just isn't quite as mobile as he was in the past, although he was never famed for mobility, but someone protecting quite a slow defence as well. That's somewhere where you could possibly cause problems for them on the break.
I'm imagining they have Dylan McGeoch, or do they?
They do,
Yes.
yeah.
And I remember when he briefly played for us, he was some sort of like attacking midfielder / winger type of player. I remember one game against Swindon towards the end of that Sixfield season where I think he came on at half time or something, and the one thing he did was he just picked up the ball in our half of the pitch and ran basically the entire length. It took on about 6 or 7 players, but then it was just like pass the ball, and just like every opportunity he had to pass the ball, he just didn't take it, and then he got tackled, and Swindon went up the other end instantaneously and scored a goal.
Thanks for coming, Dylan.
Yeah, and I think he basically became, when he went back to Scotland, went to Hibernian, became sort of a deep line player, sort of controlling the game. So he became just a completely different player to the one that we had signed.
Yeah, that's strange because I can't see him doing that from the scant amount that I saw of him. The Sunderland squad, looking at it, is hurting my eyes. It feels like when you play a football game, like on Pro Evo, if you play Master League or something, and they chuck in, like create a club by just chucking in like a random selection of other players from other clubs. Does that make sense? They just can't see these.
Yeah.
I don't see these as being Sunderland players. I don't know Chris Maguire, Dylan McGee, Aidan McGeady's still there.
Oh yeah. He's still getting back to fitness. I think he's come on the last couple of games for them, and is getting back up to speed. But yeah, he's someone who could tear us apart if he's playing at his best. But as has been the case with Sunderland over the past couple of years, players aren't going there to play their best football.
A phenomenal number of ex-Celtic players as well.
Yeah,
Adam Matthews, Glenn Loovens.
But is that seen as just the gold standard if you're a manager from St Mirren and you're just like, where do all the Magic players come from? Oh yeah, the team that wins 9 leagues in a row, that'll be them.
Yeah. Okay.
They're also going to have 5,000 fans as well, which is going to be quite the spectacle.
Is that so?
Yeah. I
really hope we delay the kickoff. And just nod to them. Just be like, oh, yeah. Do you remember? Of course you do. You don't.
That's actually quite likely, though, isn't it?
Well, with 5,000 fans, yeah, it really could happen, couldn't it?
Yeah. It's your fault, Sunderland. You bought too many fans.
Yeah. Well, let's cross our fingers and hope that happens. Do you want to make a prediction or?
Aaron, I think you know what I'm going to predict. There's no way in hell I'll predict to win. I think they're somewhere towards a par with Barnsley. They're that sort of team. I think the assumption with Sunderland heading into this season was they were going to be far, far, far too good for this level, and they're just very good at this level. So they're fannable, they're beatable, but I don't trust us to go out and put out a performance against one of the best teams in this division and go and beat them. I think, yeah, as I said, we've got a chance, but if I'm looking at the two teams on a piece of paper, I'd probably go for the Sunderland one.
Okay, good. Anything else before we move on to listener questions?
Just after that prediction, after your Oxford prediction, Dom, I considered going through all of your predictions and setting up a league table as to what would have happened if Dom was always right. Because the Oxford one filled me with so much dread when I think you said something along the lines of, if they're in any way firing all cylinders, they have the capacity to tear us to pieces. I was like, oh God, like, I'm so glad I'm not going to this match. And then I know they didn't. And I know that's not your fault, but I just don't know what to think now, because I set so much stock by what you say, because you're often right and you know so much, that it just really confused me when we beat them.
The one time I tried sort of mapping my predictions versus the versus how that would affect where we'd finish in the league table was that season where it was like Presley Mowbray, where we were basically down the bottom for almost the entire season, and we would have finished 8th. But I think that was sort of on the basis of I just put in so many like predictions of wins, going like, would you here?
Gambler's fallacy predictions. You'd be like, you can't keep losing games. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah,
it's been read for ages.
Yeah. So basically, presumably on that sort of basis, we would have like been lower mid-table last season based on my predictions or whatever. Just going like, we don't usually win more than 1 or 2 games in a row. So I mean, that's why I didn't predict a win against Bristol Rovers last week, because I'm like, Romans never wins like 3 or 4 games in a row.
Yeah,
that's just crazy talk.
Yeah,
I really thought we were going to win though. But yeah, you were right.
Shall we do listener questions? Yes, we shall. Laurie, I'm going to give this one to you to start off with, because it feels very much like a dig at you. So, this is from Twigs on Twitter. Should Cov fans stop being prima donnas and get on with standing in shitty uncovered stands like the good old days, or do these soft bastards have a point? which feels like an alternative to his original point, but still sort of also the same.
So the gist is, should we stop complaining about getting wet, or is it legit to complain about getting wet?
Basically, yeah.
I just think £21 or whatever it was I paid. The Bristol Rovers, I've seen their stadium evolve, albeit very slowly, from like a single cell amoeba to like a double celled amoeba in the last like 20 years while I've lived there. And I saw on the highlights that you can't really see when you're in the shitty away end that they've spent the money on covering up the only bit of uncovered terrace for the home fans with a similarly kind of budget looking installation that kind of looks like some kind of, I don't know, steel fronted tent. So they've got the money. Like, they're selling players. Like, they make money. Who's that guy? They sold Billy Bowden. Like, how hard is it to put up a canopy above the away end? It's just so unfair. Like, that's all I can come up with. It's so unfair. And they get to come to our stadium. We charge them, like, basically the same. And they get the best day of their life. They've never seen such luxury. It's unbelievable. There should be rules against it.
And to think he called you a prima donna. The question from Rich on Twitter: why do our fans seem to think that last year was any good before April, or Robbins had a plan, and this year is an unmitigated disaster by comparison? What's the point of destroying your own players on social media? Does anybody realise it's only September? Dom, do you want to pick anything out of
that? Yeah, it's definitely September.
You can't argue with that, yeah.
Yeah. On the slating on social media thing, the one thing I was thinking of is that debate over whether you should boo your team at half time. And I'm kind of in the pro camp of this purely on the basis of, if you boo at full time, the game's over. There's like no chance for a reaction from the players. Whereas if it's like 0-0, but the team's not really showing anything, or like you're a goal or two down and it looks like the team's going through emotions, maybe you boo at half time just to tell the players that we're expecting more than that, and you need to react in the second half. I suppose it's sort of how you frame the criticism, whether it's constructive or whether you just view any kind of criticism is going to have a negative effect. And I suppose you don't know what the players are like. You don't know how they react to things. I'm sure there'll be some players who will read criticism on social media and just go like, I'll prove this person right. I'll put in a reaction next week and shove it in their faces, like Marcus Tugguy doing his cupping his ears when he scored his first goal after about 20 attempts against Walsall. And then there'll be some players who just can't take it at all. And I suppose you just don't really know that. And I suppose it's safer when it comes to criticising people on social media to try and avoid it, although it can be difficult because some players are known to search their own name. So it can be tough to even comment on a player's performance, even without like including their Twitter handle or whatever, without there being a chance of them coming across it, I suppose.
It's just so hard for us to comment, isn't it? Because like no one's ever cared about anything I've ever done enough to come and watch me do it. So I don't know how I'd react to someone booing me. I'd be like, Jesus Christ, there's someone watching me do something. Like, it's like, what could I possibly do? I'm reading my book and someone boo me or cheer me. I don't know what would make me do it better, reading or slower. I don't know. So would I prefer getting cheered off at half time if I was doing badly? I'd be like, well, maybe I'd keep doing what I'm doing then because they seem to like it. But if they booed me, I'd think, well, fuck this lot. Or would I think, I'll prove? I suppose it comes down to individual players and their mentality. So I don't think you can say one team as a whole will respond in an identical way to getting booed at half time. But I agree with your point about getting a reaction. Like they can't shower better if you've booed them at the end of the game.
It reminds me one time of something that my mum did, which blew my mind, which was we went to Pizza Hut together and she gave the waitress a tip at the start of the meal, and of course it meant the service, but she basically waited on us hand and foot She was like, yeah, what's the point in tipping someone at the end of the meal when they've already done all their stuff? And I was like, whoa.
Life hack.
Question from Mitchell. I'm going to class this as a naughty question. So Laurie, if you can
more abuse for me.
Take it on that. No, not at all. He asks, if Bakayoko and Huula were the only strikers available, which of the midfielders would you play up front? It's a naughty question, isn't it?
God, yeah. Imagine who would be the. Well, I do want to spend at least 15 minutes this season watching Liam Kelly play up front. That would be interesting for all involved, surely.
Let's go with this one from Thomas Murden. Given that Andrew is playing a less significant role than we'd anticipated at the start of the season, are you happy that Robbins isn't fitting in players for the sake of it, or would you rather see him reintroduced to the side in an effort to score more goals from open play, Dom?
It's really interesting concept that Robbins hasn't been sort of trying to fit players into the side willy-nilly, because we sort of started the season with that Andrew Bayliss access, and that looks like the thing we're going to be hanging our hat on. And then Connor Chaplin comes, and we kind of torn things up and reverted to something that was closer to what we were last season, and Andrew has been relegated to the bench. It does seem weird that we do have quite a large squad, but there are some players who it's hard to see obvious replacements for them in the side, with Jordan Shipley being the obvious example. If you take Shipley out the side, you kind of got to change the way the whole team is set up, because we don't have another sort of similar left-sided player. You either, I mean, yeah, I was going to say, do we even have like another left-footed sort of wide player? But we've got Jones and Thomas, but they do love cutting in on their left foot. But yeah, it's sort of bringing Adesanya in, and yeah, that just completely changes the balance of the side, or Hiruda, or So I reject the concept of this question, the premise of this question.
And a final question, which I'm not even going to give anyone an opportunity to answer, from Biamu's Bike, the blog on Twitter. Does Robbins have a plan B, which I can only assume is a typo? Does Robbins have a plan A? I think that's everything. Anyone want to plug anything? Where can we find your respective blogs? Dom, you first.
Sidewayssammy.com.
Laurie?
I haven't actually written one yet, so I'm not going to plug it because I've been very lazy / busy this weekend. But thelonelyseason.club, but I'll try and do it on Wednesday.
Yeah, pull your finger out. Okay, I think that's everything. Anything else to plug? Anything I've forgotten? Anything we need to wrap up before we leave?
I just think we need to remember that we have an incredible attacking axis in this team. Maybe the best we've seen in a very long time, since maybe the Madison days. We just need to find a way to make it work. Like Chaplin, Bayliss,
Shipley,
Andrew. It's got to work at some point. It's got to work. Jones when he comes back, like really incredible players. And I mean Robbins, if he flops it from this position, he's there's nowhere for him to hide.
There you go. Big talk. Big talk to end on. Thank you, Laurie.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you, Dom.
It's good to be on.
And thanks for listening. Bye.